first, thanks to Ken and Kathy and Holly and Raj and all these great people at PEI and Steve and Lars, and especially the Barron family and their offspring and Bert Kurtzstetler, who's been involved in these issues. So lots and lots of thanks to spread out here. And to my fellow panelists, both here and preceding me, and people at Princeton like Bill Gleason who are moving this forward. So gratitude abounds. And that is, I think, a fundamental ecological virtue that we're all cultivating. Right? So having said that, I think I didn't prepare anything either, but I think what is beginning to happen at Princeton, due to the push from the outside, I must say, and due to great poet residing here of Paul Muldoon fame and so on, I think that this possibility that isn't, I would say, taking place as well or as critically, perhaps, in other parts of our country, is this huge. So C.P. Snow says there's a gap, right, between the two cultures of science and humanities, and that's been enduring for a long time. And I think my sense is because climate science has not been communicated to a larger public, that the scientists, like Steve Pacala and so on, and the Climate Central group here that was founded because of this reason, is realizing that the hockey stick graphs and the statistics and facts don't change. This is what we've been hearing, don't change people and behavior. But I think our challenge, as it came up yesterday with Rob Sokolov's talk, is what are the next steps of moving with people like Rob and Henry and Lars and Steve into, I would say, an even more critical dialogue that identifies what are the problems that are still ahead of us. And part of it is, we talked yesterday about institutional problems and gaps and so on, but I think it comes down to language, which is why literature and writing is so important, and how we express this profound sense of, dare I say, in academia, we dwell in mystery. We live in something, again, do I say it in academia? We live in a sacred universe. We're in the midst of a hymn of the universe, which we just heard, singing throughout. It's what poetry does. It's what music does. But why is it we can't allow ourselves to sing as humans with language about the beauty and complexity in which we dwell? That, to me, is the biggest challenge within academia, but it's outside as well, because I think our general public, the nature writers are a phenomenon right now, I think, because they are giving people a language to express something much deeper. I'll stop at that, but I will really say, in addition to Paul and the musicians the music we just heard and the drama we just had, and Doug, your extraordinarily important work with environmental justice, we're all looking for that kind of language. And so to me, it's freeing the human heart and soul for what is ahead. And Tom Barron gave us that challenge from the very beginning. And that, to me, is the challenge we have to rise up to. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
See, I knew there was a reason not to have you scripted and to go first with you, Mary. That was absolutely wonderful.
I think we're done.
I know.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so who would like to go next?
I just want to leap
Absolutely,
on
Michael.
to what Mary Evelyn just said, which is I think why Rob's challenge yesterday was provocative and a little scary, and I sort of got my haunches up and then sort of slept on it, which was the question of so what are you all going to do?
Exactly.
And actually, I realized that I think it is it's there are reasons institutionally, and I don't mean just within academia, but institutionally, there are great, amazing reasons for institutions to not interact with each other. Certainly there are reasons for universities not to intermingle their resources or their academics or certainly their money, which means not as much that there's redundancy, but that there's reasons that people don't talk to each other. I mean, within what I think Steve and I do, it's as pronounced in a totally different universe of there's reasons for institutions not to talk to each other. There's certainly reasons for not-for-profit theaters not to talk to for-profit theaters, but certainly for not-for-profit theaters not to talk to other not-for-profit institutions, not to talk to academic institutions. And I think what I got from yesterday was, in a lot of ways, it's up to us, the individual academics, scholars, people in the humanities, scientists, to force those things to change and to, sometimes drag institutions kicking and screaming. I think what a lot of the things that are happening at PEI, and I think what Rob is trying to get us to do, what the Barrons are trying to get us to do with so many groups is, we're at the table together right now. And to me, the thing we were talking at lunch about this was, how do we get together again? How do we expand this little table? I mean, there will be more Barron professors, but how do we expand this table to include all the various incredibly diverse hundreds and hundreds and thousands of scholars and academics and artists and writers and scientists and social scientists, et cetera, who are part of this discussion, because we all have so much to learn from each other, and we also have incredibly busy lives that are incredibly segmented and are within institutions that have not being given any reason to make us talk to each other. So that's a big question. So I guess I come out of this with that. It's still the same charge I think Rob gave yesterday, but I think I think of it more personally now as a personal mission. I don't know what I just said.
What you said was a wonderful follow-up to Mary Evelyn, actually. And right, too, in the sense that, Rob threw down the charge to us, and I think it was easy to sort of get your hunches up a little, but he's right. He's absolutely right. And, everything that's going on here suggests that there's an interest in the sciences to be ready for what we'll have to offer, but we need to be clear on what we can bring to the table, and it's a lot. And you're right, Michael. There are a lot of us. Other thoughts? Yeah, absolutely, Steve.
I guess I'll chime in if we're throwing down gauntlets and putting challenges out to the universe, not necessarily this room, but if we are opening our hearts, and if somebody is listening, I just wanted to say that one big takeaway that I have from this concentrated time of thought and reflection is the importance of having a civil society. In this particular case, to solve, or at least address, mitigate, respond to a very real and present crisis. And I guess what I want to put out there to the universe is that our civil society is very much imperiled, which has dire consequences to the environment. And I think it was interesting for Michael and I to be in this room where Rob was speaking to the humanities, but it felt, I think, largely as a conversation within academia, and where we occasionally drop into academia, but we are in some outside world called the nonprofit arts, which is
awesome.
Yeah, which is shrinking and shriveling year by year, and it will continue to exist. But it would be a myth to say that there's freedom of speech in the nonprofit artistic sector. We are more and more dominated by corporate culture, by the media and the worldview that comes from corporate culture. The nonprofit sector, particularly in the theater, well, actually in all of the arts, is really driven by a slightly different version of the same market. And and I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to felt enough changes over the past 25 years to see the space we have to really have meaningful conversations with each other shrinking. And it was a great experience for us to escape from the brutal world out there and come into the academy for a year and to be able to actually think and work, which you get like, it's like 4% of our lives is actually thinking and working and making art, and 96% is scrambling for money. I'm exaggerating a little. So I guess my challenge is to both the sciences and the humanities in the world of the academy. It's one of the last bastions of civil society holding on with any sort of vigor and strength, and keep the bridges open to those of us outside the gates of the city.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And a little while ago, Tom Barron and I were both talking about what goes on inside of academia and outside. And environmentally, I think it is, to be applauded what you guys do, because you bring it to a larger audience that we don't always know quite how to do. So in the environmental humanities, we deal with esoteric issues sometimes, and it's hard to know how to translate that and communicate that. But that's one of the reasons we had the artists that we've had here, is because they're doing that too. And I think it's something that it's easy to forget. And you guys are so great because you're sort of a tie between the two worlds. Or you entered our world for a while and were part of it, and showed what synergy can be done there, which I think is phenomenal.
But we can only do what we can do. We exist. No, and I say that with thank you. That's we do what we do, as I think all of us do, at the largesse of institutions, and whether that's academic institutions or government. Let's say, especially on this project, this project has been mostly funded by academic and governmental institutions, which has been amazing, but very rare. And we can bring things to larger audiences through the largesse of that. We can do a lot on our own, but we cannot, the ongoing experience of bringing the work to larger audiences comes entirely through that. And one thing we were saying, the civil society question is if you think of Athens or Elizabethan London, and certainly Indian culture and Chinese culture, the theater was the place for civil discourse. And I'm not sure that at the moment we have a public space. It doesn't need to be the theater, but at the moment I don't know that we have a public space where the culture has to come to terms with itself and, in a sense, judge itself and figure out what it is that's not quite political. I would say that's not part of the, say, democratic voting process which should be alive and well and all those things, and I think that's its own kind of peril. But specifically what's so amazing when you look at those moments in any culture are the moments when it goes outside of the specifically political realm into the cultural realm, and you have a moment of real discourse about what are we there for. And if you look, we were saying, if you look at the Theban plays of Sophocles, if you look at the Tempest of Shakespeare, if you look at these, and which are moments when this kind of culture existed, those are plays about the environment. Those are plays about land use. Those are plays about environmental disaster. Those are plays about the relationship between people and the natural world. The greatest moments, those two things do go hand in hand when a society has had a cultural realm to look at itself, to critique itself, to hold as a mirror up to nature. That's what comes out of it. And I think that would be my gauntlet, is, it can happen.
More thoughts? David?
So I guess I come at this from a different direction, but wind up in the same place. And that is that I used to be, for a long time, the social scientist, because I was in a political science department, that the scientists came to. Right? We need a policy person on this grant. I don't do public policy on the theater. Well, we can work with you. And it was that sort of, the science reaching out. And I did a lot of that in the Health Bound program on the relationship between environmental science and policy. And that was interesting. But one of the things that I was really appreciative of coming here was the move to humanities, the move to culture, because all I could say to the scientists was, well, you can learn politics, but it's not really going to help you. I mean, I can tell you why your lab discoveries are not going to just become public policy. I can tell you what the barriers are going to be in the political realm, but we really need to talk more broadly about, especially about environment and culture and the way it plays into politics. So coming here and being able to start to think more about environment and humanities and environmental humanities, and now where I am at Sydney, which is dedicated to environmental humanities and has funded an environmental humanities group, and then to come here and to have this sort of gathering and to interact. I mean, I have never been sort of sandwiched with music before. I mean, it's just, and it feels so good and important and related. And that, to me, that sort of goes to Ron. It's environmental humanities does need to pick it up, does need to develop itself as a force, and there's funding coming there, right? So Mellon Foundation just gave a significant amount to this international consortium of humanities centers to establish 5 environmental humanities observatories. One will be at Arizona State, we'll have one at the University of Sydney. And this is building environmental humanities in these various regions. And that's up to us. And I would not have been in that space and part of that had it not been for this gig. So I'm deeply appreciative in a long-term way, appreciative for that opportunity and what it's going to do, not only for what I'll be involved in, but for what it's going to do for this idea of environmental humanities and how it's actually going to have some sort of impact more broadly.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think for those sort of outside of what's going on here, there is a palpable feel that there's this sort of momentum building in the environmental humanities, and not just individual fields. And I think a lot of us, I do environmental criticism, but are aware that it's happening elsewhere too, and it's sort of moving in the same direction, and we're sort of preoccupied with the same issues. And something like environmental justice, I don't think anyone here cannot deal with environmental justice as an issue, even though it may have been sort of a far field from us for a while ago. So I think it's absolutely right. Any other thoughts before I open this up to John?
Just joining with my colleagues in gratitude for everyone at PEI and for the Barron family, with thanks for this opportunity and just a short meditation on time. We knew we were coming to Princeton. But we went to China in March of last year, and we would be here in the fall, so there was something about time drawing us forward. What would we do while we were here? What would we think about? And so when we went to China to show this film, Journey of the Universe, in the back of our mind was this time meditation. And at one point, we showed the film in Beijing at 7 universities, at Beijing, Dalian, Harbin, and Shanghai. In Harbin, at the Harbin Institute of Technology, we were told perhaps 100 students will have good English, that they'll be in the room. And we walked into this room, not dissimilar to this, 400 students, all talking, and the moment we walked in, silence, that filtered silence. And they all turn and look, and that lovely Chinese politeness where they applauded us in. And we showed the film, we made some remarks, we showed the film, then we took questions. And the dean stood up to take the questions. And a focus came. And this meditation on time began to frame itself more clearly. Because the student stood up and he said, you two are married. You know what love is. Tell us what love is. Tell us how, when love comes to us, we know who it is that we're feeling. And how did love come out of the universe? So that's...
We're all waiting with bated breath.
Who is it who told us to live the question? Rilke. So I'm suggesting that our time at PEI was living the love. Amen.
Don't you hate it when everyone on a panel gets along, though?
Okay. So questions for our panel, or maybe a question that'll get everyone not getting along. So.
Yeah, might a focus on landscape architecture help to bridge the gap between the two types of disciplines, science and humanities. I know from my own experience living here in the Princeton area, I have an abundance of evergreen trees, including lots of colors going around in my perimeter, and I've got birds there singing all 12 months of the year. And you know, we don't have the kind of drought here in northern Colorado, but maybe more of a focus on planting trees, which will draw the same birds.
Landscape architecture and architecture in general, I was thinking throughout the conference, they were sort of absent. It would have been nice here. For the reason you say, sort of a bridge into sort of, the human into the built human environment, which would have been good. So we won't be here next year, but saying to the folks at PEI, something to think about for the future. I think that's right, absolutely right.
Ken, if I can just, there has been, of course, a lot of work in that area. And one person at our School of Forestry, Alex Felsen, is doing some of the most incredible creative work in landscape architecture, urbanization, and so on. And David Orr, of course, has done amazing work with design within academia and building this first green building out at Oberlin and so on. So there's a lot of and Ian Harg at University of Pennsylvania thinking this through. So I agree it has to be brought into the discussion, but it's quite robust already. Yeah.
More questions? Kathy?
Oh, this will be good.
Probably more of a comment than a question, but looking at the five of you up there and thinking about this last 5 years, including Kim Smith's contract, sorry, was not here. I look at the 5 years, thinking about this incredible body of work that's been done here at Princeton because of your energy, because of the opportunities, and I thank you for that. But even what hasn't been discussed too much at all at this conference is the dimension of your visits that also involve teaching. And I think what PEI is so committed to is not only the research, which you did incredible work here while you were here, but the teaching of this generation to think about culture, to think about beauty, to think about ethics and values as it relates to the environment is really helping us prepare this generation for whatever they go do, whatever they do in their life, or their professional life, or their personal lives as citizens, they will carry that with them. And this, so for those in the audience who are familiar with this, each of our Barron visitors has taught a course. And that's been, Nicole alluded to how special that experience was. But that makes such a difference here. And it's a really important thing. And I talked a little bit last night with Rob Sokolow, and Rob is very much inviting the humanities to be part of the solution. Because I think as Rob and Steve have gone very deep on our environmental crisis, and Steve McCollum said this many, many times, that climate change is the problem. But the more he studied about it, the more scared he was, the more worried he was, the more he realized most of the other problems he had ever studied in his career were that the more he knew, the more confident he felt, whereas this one's the one that continues to perplex and worry him. And so he's really moved from inquiry into solutions. And I think where he feels so most passionate about this, I can speak for him, he and Rob both, looking at the humanities into the dialogue, is to be part of the solution. In the communications, it's very able to know climate simple. It's all about how to communicate this in a way that people embrace it individually and collectively in a way that there's meaning and possibility for the solution. So I think that's where the humanities, we continue to invite the police and Paul Muldoon has been so receptive and we hope to engage the other department chairs and faculty, to the point that it interests them or it interests their students to welcome this opportunity to talk about this. So anyway, thank you all.
If I may just put a story into Steve's mouth, or just paraphrase it. Steve was on a panel recently that was about artists working in conjunction with scientists. Do you mind if I just? And so it was a few artists and scientists they'd been collaborating on different projects with, and so it was a lot of artists who brought their scientists, sort of a fairly a scientist with them. And Steve, I brought one of our students from our class time, Aaron Sherman, who was, by all accounts, sort of blew everyone else out of the water just by being, because of her experience in the class, which was she really, and by being someone who as an undergraduate had been part of this liberal arts education, bridging the gap between science, that was, and I think that was so much what the class taught us was how exciting these students who you can find who can bridge, and how when you start with undergraduates, especially, I think you find these minds that are really receptive to new ways of, in the way that the rest of us who are in our kind of like boxes of what it is that I do can forget about. And so that, I think, certainly to respond to that, and thank you for bringing that up, Kathy, because I think it's for all of us, it's been a crucial, as much for us, maybe, I don't know what the students get out of it, but I do know what we get out of it.
I would add, since I'm the one of the crew that's actually teaching right now, the PEI has such interesting students, and I don't mean that just because they're students from Princeton or whatever, but because they're such an interesting blend of interests in fields and disciplines. So most of my students are not from the humanities, probably only 25, 30% are humanities students, and they're great. But it's wonderful to read things with scientists, with people from the Woodrow Wilson School of Policy, people who are in geoscience, people who do, evolutionary biology, and to read the same text and to bring those different opinions together. And honestly, we're talking about how the sciences are interacting with the humanities, but from my point of view, I mean this most sincerely, I learn an enormous amount because I get to test market things to see how they play. And it is changing. It changes all the time. So Rachel Carson, the way she's read today, is very different than 10 years ago. And it's a good thing. And we have this it's not only a level of commitment and interest, but a whole new kind of perspective that's being brought in on things. And it's students at PEI are great in that way. The other thing I'll just add that there has been, not only with like the receptiveness of this conference and all, but you mentioned like Rob and Steve. Both Rob and Steve and I separately have been talking about ways of actual physical projects that could be done to bring together the sciences and humanities, especially because my interest happens to be like in new media and massively collaborative, collective intelligence projects. It's fascinating that we can wind up talking about projects that could actually be enacted that are as much humanities, or at least humanities and sciences together. So it's been great that way. Other questions?
Can I just add a comment?
Absolutely.
Very briefly, Kathy, thank you so much for bringing that emphasis back, because we are still in touch with many of those students, still having exchange, and I know some in the audience also. This wonderful exchange, and Holly, also the communications from PEI into the community. We're still in touch with people in the community that we spoke with about our work, thanks to your having arranged those exchanges.
And just to add, so we don't forget, everyone here at PEI that's made this possible. So Holly, I mentioned her at the beginning, but Holly, as communication officer, has organized so much of this event. Kathy Hackett, who we just heard from, has been the associate director. It's seriously, people like Laura Matecha is behind the scenes, you don't see her, organized everything, all the arrangements for everyone to get here and all. Raj Chashki in the back. Had it been just on me, I'm sure Skype would not have worked. We wouldn't have had that great conversation with Fermi. So, in front of Raj, Igor Hafetz is our new webmaster here. Igor has been doing, I guess, Burning the Midnight Oil. If you go to Facebook, the Princeton Facebook homepage, we were there last I looked. You'll see pictures from the conference. You'll recognize Tom Barron as our first picture. So just a wonderful group. And all here, by the way, on Saturday doing this conference. It's great. Other comments or questions? Mary Evelyn?
No, I was feeling you were moving towards the Paul Muldoon. And I actually just wanted to ask, if I'm not putting them on the spot, I would love to hear from both Curry and Tom just briefly about your impressions or your hopes, going forward, because not only are we grateful to you, but you have an intellectual input here that I think really matters. So if you don't mind.
Is it okay? I believe so, yeah.
My gratitude goes to you especially for the work with the students. My passion for this project is the hope that through the topic of humanities, the issues of our environmental situation will be communicated through a much broader group of students and who will grow into members of their communities, important leaders in their communities, who will care more about the environment and taking good care of it and of our planet. Thank you for your work.
I can't improve on that. I would just echo this note of gratitude that is in the air here, because what all of you have done, what all of you have brought in your disparate, wonderful, diverse ways are voices that are together, I think, creating that new language that Mary Evelyn referred to. I've been just so moved this 2 days about the diversity of voices and wonderful sources of inspiration and hope, as well as challenge and serious struggle and concern, all of which are part of that language. So if you think about, in a very biggest sweep of geologic time, not just little brief human time, all we have is whatever time we're given to raise our voices, our innermost soul that tells us what's important, and this planet that supports and nourishes all of us. And I've really felt the coming together of all three of those things. So thank you. I don't think we'll be fossils. Thanks to what you said.
You know, G, I don't know how we could follow that up, so I think we'll end it now in the sense that we're going to stop for a few minutes to dismantle the roundtable, literally, and then Paul Muldoon and his band, Wayside Shrines, will perform. So at this point, I'm going to put down the mic. I'll be stepping into the audience just to enjoy it with everyone else in a few minutes. So thank everyone here for coming, by the way.